For the record, Martha, I liked the hair.
Oh, that's nice, John.
We begin with a Fox News alert. Hurricane Matthew grinding its way up the Florida coast, blasting the coastline with howling winds, pounding waves, knocking out power to tens of thousands and leaving a devastating path of destruction behind. Welcome to Happening Now on this Friday morning. I'm John Scott.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jenna Lee. And forecasters say Matthew's strongest winds are actually offshore, but the powerful Category 3 storm is still strong enough to threaten a broad stretch of the southeast. And the severe conditions considered life-threatening conditions in many areas.
My biggest concern now is over 10 foot of storm surge that's going to hit the north part of the state, Jacksonville, just north of there, Amelia Island. It's a low-lying area, so that's my biggest concern right now.
We have Fox Team coverage. Our senior meteorologist Janice Dean is live in the Fox Extreme Weather Center, but we start with Brian Yennis, who's live in Sebastian Inlet, Florida. Brian?
Hi, Jenna. Well, I am right now actually right in between Sebastian Inlet and Vero Beach. This is a neighborhood that experienced actually some of the damage from last night's storm. We are on the barrier island that was under mandatory evacuation because of the storm. Take a look at what it caused. We've got some foliage on the ground here, and we've got a tree that's come down in the entrance of this neighborhood. This is a guarded gate neighborhood of the Marsh Island Club, and this is the kind of stuff that we're seeing all throughout South Florida. The storm and the powerful hurricane winds, as you had said, were off the coast for the most part. Luckily, a lot of people here in South Florida are feeling lucky, but as Governor Rick Scott said, that is only half the state. Jacksonville in the north of the state is getting pummeled right now by this hurricane, so half the state out of the woods, and now it's all about the cleanup. Some 600,000 people are without power. That number is expected to climb, but as that number is expected to climb, so is the work that Florida Power and Light is doing to restore power. Obviously, in locations like this, as people are starting to come out of their neighborhoods and seeing and assessing the damage, they are now also going to be able to, FP&L crews are going to be able to put that power back on. Some 4,500 flights have been canceled from Wednesday through Saturday. Orlando International Airport is closed through Saturday as they are getting pummeled right now by this storm just north of us. There has been, unfortunately, one death that has been attributed to this storm, a St. Lucie County woman, a 58-year-old woman who had suffered cardiac arrest, and emergency crews were unable to get to her, unfortunately, and she passed away, and they're considering that a storm-related death because the emergency crews were unable to get to her because of the storm. Other than that, we've got some 22,000 people in shelters, and the major highways and interstates are open. Publixes, the supermarkets and things are starting to come open, and people are starting to come out here in South Florida assessing the damage, but the overall consensus here right now for half the state is this could have been worse, and much worse than what it is right now, but still obviously a powerful storm. Jenna, Scott?
Brian, thank you very much.
So Hurricane Matthew is moving north along the eastern U.S. coast. Senior meteorologist Janice Dean is tracking its path from the Fox Extreme Weather Center. JD.
Hi, John. Yeah, new advisory out from the National Hurricane Center. Still a Category 3 storm. And we can't stress this enough. We're not going to see the results of this hurricane for days. So the good news is the worst of the weather, the worst of the winds have remained offshore. However, we still have a destructive storm surge ahead of this with those counterclockwise winds pushing ocean water in towards North Florida and Georgia and South Carolina, and that's what Governor Rick Scott is concerned about over the next 24 hours. Let's take a look at the radar. We had an earlier tornado warning south of Jacksonville. They've lifted that, I do believe. That was for 11 a.m. They have lifted that tornado warning, but with these landfalling tropical systems, they already have the friction, so we could see the potential for some weak rotation and tornadoes throughout the day as the storm continues to crawl up the coastline. And we're not done with this because we still have a very formidable storm for Georgia and the Carolinas and up towards Virginia as we get into the weekend when we hopefully see this storm exit. Not only storm surge of, they're saying now, 6 to 12 feet above high tide, but we could see upwards of a foot of rainfall, so flash flooding is going to be an issue. And we've been stressing this, that the #1 killer from landfalling hurricanes is the the water, is the flooding and the storm surge. So we're not out of the woods by any stretch of the imagination, and we're still dealing with a major hurricane heading into the weekend. And look at this, coming very close to South Carolina on Saturday. So that's going to be a big concern, especially since we've got a lot of low-lying areas, John Scott. And the computer models are saying that we're still going to be dealing with this hurricane for the next 48 hours at the very least. Back to you.
That storm surge is so dangerous.
Yes. I mean, Hurricane Sandy, it was the storm surge, and that was just a Category 1.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Hurricane Katrina, which was a Category 3 when it made landfall. Storm surge, that was what killed people.
All right. Janice Dean, we'll let you get back to watching the hurricane, keeping an eye on it for us. Thank you.
So just move a little bit north from Florida. The Georgia Governor Nathan Deal ordering mandatory evacuations for 500,000 residents in 6 coastal counties and voluntary evacuations for 100,000 more in low-lying areas west of Interstate 95. Joining me now on the phone, Eddie Deloche. He's the mayor of Savannah, Georgia. Mr. Mayor, it's nice of you to spend some time with us as we look ahead for this storm. What's current conditions for your city right now?
Current conditions are mostly rain. We got rain started. It's not heavy, but it hasn't come in at heavy at times. But basically, the rain has started in a band, and some wind has picked up in the band. So we're looking anticipating something in here around 6 o'clock to start really hitting heavy.
We were looking at some video as you were talking. Our viewers were the traffic for folks that were evacuated. And I'm curious for you as mayor, how concerned you are now that the storm was not as bad as expected in Florida, that maybe folks in Savannah don't heed the same warnings because it doesn't look quite as bad as everyone thought.
We've had great results as far as people being out. We really got one more hour here, and then we closed down a shelter that we had set up to bring people together and move them out of the low-lying areas and out of Savannah. We've had about 2,000 accept that offer, and we've put them on buses, and everything has run smooth. We've moved them out to outlying areas. So we've had good results. We feel like we've got a good group that has left the community, and all we can do is tell those that are here to hunker down and hold on, and we'll get to them as soon as the weather participates and makes it where we can get out and about and check those folks out.
The director of the National Hurricane Center says it's almost too late to be prepared in Georgia because of the storm arriving. How is traffic on the roads now? Because we're showing so much traffic on the video. Is it tough for people to get out of town?
Yeah, it's time for people to get out of town, and it is. After they open that, the 4 lanes going towards Dublin west, that really took a lot of pressure off that, and people have started moving, and it's moving pretty well. It's not, you're not going to fly down the road, but you're going to move at a good pace and get on out of town. So I think we have people continually coming here to get on the buses, and we have people that are continually leaving town. So we'll have people leaving town up to tonight, I anticipate.
Mr. Mayor, nice of you to join us. We appreciate it very much. I know you're very busy. Savannah's the next city we're keeping an eye on. Thank you, Mayor Deloche. In the meantime, just north of Georgia, of course, is South Carolina. The city of Charleston in particular in focus. The South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley just said a few words about hurricane preparations. There's an ongoing press conference. We're going to just take a minute to listen in here.
In terms of impacts to the state, I think one of the greatest impacts would be the threat for storm surge. Right now, we're looking at the potential for disastrous and life-threatening storm surge inundation along the coast. It's especially true for the central and southern part of the coast, down, across Charleston, down near Beaufort. In a worst-case scenario, if this storm makes landfall, storm surge inundation, so that's how high the water will get above normally dry ground, could be over 8 feet. That is a lot of water. The storm surge is not going to just be at the coast. The storm surge can extend miles inland. So it doesn't matter that you don't have a beachfront home. You could be impacted by the storm surge well inland. You need to be aware of that. In addition, we expect significant damage to coastal structures due to the combination of very high inundation, battering waves, and high tides. Some of the more vulnerable areas, we have Defusky Island, Hilton Head Island, Hunting Island, Folly Beach, Wild Dunes, Edisto Beach. Even places like Daniel Island could all be impacted by the storm surge. Roads in and out of barrier islands will become impassable due to the surge. If you don't evacuate now, you will likely become stranded. In addition to the surge threat, heavy rainfall is going to be an issue. For coastal areas, as much as 8 to 14 inches of rainfall is expected, and even as you head in toward the Midlands, we still could see 3 to 6 inches of rain. Because of that, a flash flood watch is in effect, pretty much from Rock Hill down through Aiken and all points east of there. So heavy rainfall is another concern for us that could result in flash flooding. You take a place like downtown Charleston, where you have not only the storm surge coming in, and now you have that heavy rainfall, and we're looking at the potential for deadly flooding on the Charleston Peninsula. We also want to mention the threat of winds. Now with this closer track, we could see sustained hurricane-force winds along the coast. That's going to bring extensive damage to trees. We'll see some structural damage to homes. In addition, even if you live inland, the stronger winds will pose issues to trees, but also to people living in mobile homes, so please be aware of that. And given those strong winds and the likely damage that's to occur, we should expect widespread and potentially long-lasting power outages. So again, we just urge you, if you're in an evacuation zone and have not evacuated, now is the time to do so, and we please urge you to move inland if you can. Thank you.
So you've now heard what we discussed this morning, which is the storm, as we hoped it would relieve a little bit of the situation. I think we are seeing that it is getting worse, and so we are looking at major storm surges. We're looking at major winds. We are looking at wet grounds, which could be flood-like, like what we saw last year. And when you have that, you have a lot of falling trees. So there is nothing safe about what's getting ready to happen. This is the last time you will hear my voice when I am asking you to evacuate. We need everybody to consider evacuating it and really take this very seriously. I want to tell you some updates on what we've got going on. As of 9:20, Director Smith and his team closed access to the reverted roads, and so you'll start to see the lanes of I-26 return to normal around midday. They are still going to be manning the traffic points until it gets dangerous, and then at some point we're going to have to get all of our first responders and crews off the road so that they can seek shelter as well. We have 712 troopers on the road, 2,700 DOT maintenance crew members that are ready to go, thousands of guardsmen that are on the ground but also getting ready to be deployed during the search and rescue situation. The number who have evacuated as of this morning are now at 310,000, which is up from 280,000 in my report yesterday afternoon. What we want to remind people is local bus operations are still moving to shelters. So if you are not going to evacuate upstate, at least go to a shelter. At least go to those areas where we know that we can have a safe, comfortable place for you to have food and water, and that we can...
Governor Nikki Haley saying this is the last major warning for folks in South Carolina to get out of the areas where an evacuation is ordered or suggested in some cases. Why do officials keep talking about the storm surge? Well, the director of the National Hurricane Center told us yesterday that 9 out of 10 deaths related to a storm like the one we're seeing are due to the storm surge. So this is the reason why there's so much focus on that and why we're going to be asking a lot of questions about it throughout our coverage today. So Georgia, South Carolina, that's the next focus for the storm. As we get more information, we'll bring it to you.
Of course, Hurricane Matthew arrives smack in the middle of political season. Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton meeting for the second presidential debate Sunday evening, this time in St. Louis. Mr. Trump possibly preparing for it during a town hall style event in New Hampshire last night.
I have a clock down on the floor there that says 2 minutes.
Okay.
Now, do you want me to call you when it goes over 2 minutes?
I'll tell you what, I'll make a deal. If I'm doing well, don't call me. If I'm answering the question poorly, please call me immediately.
Let's bring in Senator Judd Gregg, who played the role of Al Gore when George W. Bush prepared for the debates in 2000. Also played John Kerry in Bush's 2004 debate prep. Is that a task, Senator, that you miss?
No, it's not a task that I miss. It was pretty intense. It was a lot of work, a lot of going over videos, going over statements, listening to press conferences, reviewing what had happened in the past. So it took a lot of time. In fact, I got to the point where I was listening to so much video and tape that whenever my wife turned on the TV or the car radio, all she heard was Al Gore, and it really sort of wore her nerves thin too.
But the kind of preparation with which you helped then President George W. Bush, it is different from the format of this upcoming debate. I mean, that's two men at a lectern, two candidates at a lectern, responding basically to one another. This one is going to be town hall format, and half the questions come from the moderators, half the questions come from undecided voters, and that's a different skill to master, isn't it?
Very much so. There was a town hall debate. The last debate, I believe, with the Bush-Gore sequence was town hall. And a town hall debate is entirely different than a moderated debate because you've got the questioner, who's a very sincere person, who's very excited that they're going to get to speak to potentially, or one of these people is going to be president. And so they're very serious about what they're saying. And it's very important that the candidates take that questioner question seriously, engage with the questioner rather than engage with their opponent. So the questioner actually becomes a mediator, so to say, so a buffer, for lack of a better word, between the two candidates. And the physical interchange between the questioner and the candidate is critical, and the body language of the candidates is critical. In fact, a number of these debates have been tremendously impacted by body language. For example, when Gore, during the town hall debate, walked over into President Bush's area, which he wasn't supposed to do, and stood beside him, and President Bush sort of looked at him with an amused look and went on and answered the question. That was one of the defining moments of the debate, most people believe, and so it is a very different they're a very different horse here.
Yeah, George W. Bush sort of gave him that Texas brush-off, or so it seemed. There was also, with his father, George H.W. Bush, got caught on camera looking at his watch during one of the town hall debates, and a lot of people, the woman was still asking the question, a lot of people thought it looked like he wanted to get out of there. It didn't look like he had empathy, and empathy is something that these candidates really have to put on display, isn't it?
Absolutely, and in fact, for these candidates, it's doubly important because both of these candidates have negatives that exceed 50%, which is really startling. Most Americans really don't like either of them. And as a very practical matter, the person who wins this debate is going to be the person who comes out, in my opinion, as the most likable of the two, and also the person who projects a leadership quality that says he or she is going to take the country in a positive direction. On those two scores, if you can come out as more likable and show a sense that you're a leader who's going to take the country in a positive direction, you're probably going to win the debate and win the election.
I know that you haven't endorsed Donald Trump. You endorsed Jeb Bush in the primary season. Hillary Clinton has had a fair amount of experience at these town halls. But are you making any predictions as to whether she or Donald Trump can pull off this format to their best advantage?
You know, I actually think it benefits Donald Trump more than Hillary. Hillary's a little more mechanical, and even though she does engage with audiences and has done that, there's still a stiffness there that I think people aren't comfortable with. Whereas Donald's Donald Trump, and his great strength is that what he says is what he is. And sometimes he says things which are totally erratic, in my opinion. But as a practical matter, if he can show that sort of genuineness, I think that's going to play well for him, and do it in a way that isn't an affront to other people or runs people down or belittles his opponent, actually.
Senator Judd Gregg, who has some experience playing the role of the opposing candidate in a couple of debates. Appreciate your insights. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for your time.
Stay tuned to Fox News Channel for full coverage of the second presidential debate. All day Sunday, Fox will have live team coverage and analysis before and after the debate. It starts 9 p.m. Eastern here on Fox News Channel.
Well, time sure flies when you're having fun, not to mention all of the work that goes with it as well. It's a very special anniversary here at Fox News. We're celebrating 2 decades on the air. We'll have a look back through the years next. Fox News alert and Hurricane Matthew barreling up the Florida coast right now. Forecasters say it's still a powerful Category 3 hurricane. The major threat right now is the storm surge. The howling winds pushing an 11-foot wall of water onshore, combined with the pounding waves and torrential rains, creating a potentially life-threatening situation along a broad stretch of the southeast. The storm also causing major travel disruptions, with at least 2,000 flights canceled today, according to FlightAware. A situation we'll continue to monitor.
Republican vice presidential nominee Mike Pence telling supporters in Pennsylvania Donald Trump is making headway against Hillary Clinton despite the campaign's claims of media bias against the GOP nominee.
Sometimes I get up in the morning, I got to turn on the television with a stick. Just never know what's going to be there. But the amazing thing is, even though the media is out there doing half her work for her, it's 2-on-1. Donald Trump is still winning hearts and minds every day.
Now let's talk about it with our media panel. Judith Miller, Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative reporter, author, and Fox News contributor, and Lynn Sweet, Washington bureau chief of the Chicago Sun-Times. Republicans especially claim that they are the victims of media bias. Lynn, is it true in the coverage of this campaign?
Overall, when you look at the arc of the coverage of Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, no, no, and no. You know, maybe you could slice out one day or a short time period, but that's the ebb and flow of news. What Pence is doing is just picking up the call of Donald Trump, who rose to the GOP presidential nomination because of the massive amounts of unvarnished, favorable coverage he got, mainly on television for free. He's now just repeating things that, if we did a hard look at coverage, will be far more even-handed than he alleges.
But, Judy, isn't it the case that there are quantitative surveys that suggest that most reporters lean left?
Absolutely right. And as you know, I have complained often, John, about a liberal bias and reporters not kind of identifying their own or our own biases. But here's the difference. Normally, when Donald Trump tries to blame the messenger, in this point, it's not the media. He has to blame himself. I mean, he's the one who creates these enormous gaffes. He's the one who engages in 3 a.m. Twitter storms about fat women and Ms. Housekeeping and terrible Miss Universes, and, you know, talks about PTSD being a sign of weakness in our military people. We don't invent these things. He creates these opportunities for commentators to beat up on him. I think that Lynn is absolutely right. The media have looked again and again at Trump's business dealings, at whether or not what he says bears any relationship to reality, but they have also done that all of her political life to Hillary Clinton. And she doesn't like us, he doesn't like us, we don't want to be liked, we just want to tell the American people what they need to know to make their own decisions about whom they're going to support in November.
This discussion prompted in part by the appearance of Jim Vandehei, one of the founders of the political website Politico. Here's what he had to say earlier this week. Take a listen.
And I think reporters have become so biased, so partisan, particularly on Twitter. Go look at the Twitter feeds of the reporters from your major newspapers, the New York Times, Washington Post, others, and tell me if those are things that they would say on TV or that they would have ever been acceptable in previous campaigns. That doesn't mean Trump doesn't say plenty to get that you should get all worked up about, but you don't need to. Just like
you just don't need to work that hard.
That's not your thing. Just let the facts be out there and let people make a judgment.
Jim Vandehei, pretty respected political reporter, Lynn. Is he wrong?
Well, one of the things I would hope our viewers could do is not just take a vast generality about people as an indictment against a profession. I don't know whose Twitter feeds Jim is talking about. What is different about this campaign, as Judy and I have talked about on this show, is that in this case, because Donald Trump's words are so easily fact-checked and he so often is wrong about a variety of things, he gives openings for reporters to be more, I don't call this opinionated, to tell their readers what is going on. Now, if you take that as being for or against someone, I don't know what tweets Jim's talking about, but yes, there is a change in this election because of so many egregious things that Trump says and more fact checks. That is clearly going through in the conversation in print, TV, Facebook, Twitter, and other social media.
The contention of the Trump campaign, Judy, is that if reporters would go after Hillary Clinton on her emails, on Benghazi, I mean, you name the topic, as rough as they do Donald Trump, this race would look a whole lot different.
Well, first of all, when you look at the PolitiFact record of Donald Trump versus Hillary Clinton, you see that Donald Trump has more pants on fire, liar, liar ratings than any other candidate in kind of political history. Hillary has one of the best ratings. That being said, I think the media have pointed out again and again the contradictory things she said about her emails, the fact that things she said about sending and receiving classified information turned out not to be true. We have gone over and over Benghazi, the foundation, the appearance of conflict of interest. No candidate has been as scrutinized as Hillary Clinton. And yet, after 11 hours of congressional testimony and all of our scrutiny, she is still standing. She is the candidate. The American people are going to decide who's more honest, Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton, and whether or not honesty really matters to them.
And now
that's
there
one
are
of the
these
issues.
Well, Lynn, I just wanted to ask about this. These new disclosures as a result of a Freedom of Information request filed by the Republican National Committee. They have divulged emails from White House personnel suggesting that the White House was getting involved in sort of trying to protect Hillary Clinton's campaign. They didn't want John Kerry they didn't want Kerry answering questions on one of the CBS Sunday morning shows about her email situation, and apparently they were able to squelch that, although CBS denies that there was any deal. The White House people in their emails say, okay, it's all good, it's not going to be an issue. That just raises a lot of questions about whether the press is playing its role as a neutral referee in this thing.
Well, you described emails between a booking decision made by a White House and the campaign. What would be the end result that we could talk about is if Kerry did not go on shows and what he was asked. And that's what I hope viewers could separate. The people who book these TV shows go to the White House and ask for people to come on the shows. It's the call of the White House or a campaign to do it. But one other point I want to underscore to what Judy and I think have been talking about, that Donald Trump, who complained so much about the press, did not have the scrutiny during the primary that he's having now. And he is the GOP presidential nominee, having not gone through the kind of standard vetting that because he wasn't taken as seriously as he should have during the primary. So he was only getting now what in a more routine time he would have gotten earlier, a further reason why he should have no complaint about the press.
Well, there were predictions, Judy, that would be the case, and there were predictions along the same lines for John McCain, that John McCain was a beloved figure when he was sort of the Republican maverick, but once he became the Republican nominee, the press really started beating up on him.
Yes, it happens when you get the nomination of your party. I think you have to expect that. Now, I can remember some of the stories about John McCain that appeared on the front pages of the New York Times and other prominent papers that were truly just, I think, below standard and below the belt, and I'm not going to make any intended or unintended pun here. There were stories about his alleged relations with women and staffers that never should have appeared. The same can be true in this campaign. There are stories I wish had not appeared, stories I would have liked to have seen that I haven't read, but on the whole, Donald Trump, of all people, cannot complain about a lack of media coverage when it was the media that propelled him to the place where he is today. His fascination with and mastery of social media has been hugely impressive. It's what enabled him to rise. But here's the message, Donald. Rise by the tweet, Trump. Rise by the tantrum, fall by the tantrum, if that's your choice. But you cannot just complain about the messengers when you're giving us the message.
We'll continue to cover it all the way to Election Day. Judy Miller, Lynn Sweet, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, back to Hurricane Matthew, turning up the southern coast, knocking out power in its wake and forcing evacuations in its path. The hurricane is still offshore, but the big fear now is the storm surge. Also, a new report claims a so-called revolving door between the White House, State Department, and Clinton campaign to manage the fallout from the Democratic presidential nominee's email controversies. More on these revelations a month away from the election. Well, from America's election headquarters, a new report thrusts Hillary Clinton's email practices back into the headlines exactly a month before the general election. The Wall Street Journal breaking the news with the headline, White House coordinated on Clinton email issues. And the Journal reporting, newly disclosed emails show top Obama administration officials were in close contact with Hillary Clinton's nascent presidential campaign in early 2015 about the potential fallout from revelations that the former Secretary of State used a private email server. The story goes on to report, quote, the emails highlight the revolving door between the State Department, the White House, and the Clinton campaign in early 2015 as Mrs. Clinton geared up to run for president, end quote. Joining me now, Glenn Hall, U.S. News editor for the Wall Street Journal. So the big takeaway from the story is what, Glenn?
Well, what you see is a further sort of evidence of that interaction between the White House and the Clinton campaign to try to coordinate on the issue of those emails and those servers that were going to be a problem for the Clinton campaign as they could see.
Coordinate a message, a public message?
Well, minimally to try to avoid conversations about it and try not to let it spiral out of control. They wanted to try to tamp it down as best they could. And it's worth noting that, you know, what we were talking about here is the White House communications team, Jennifer Palmieri, who later joined the Clinton campaign, speaking to her counterpart at the State Department, who later took Jennifer's job at the White House. So that's the revolving door that we were talking about.
A lot of musical chairs, to use another analogy as well. Certain people leave, come back, switch positions. Is there anything illegal, unethical about what was done?
Can't see anything so far that would describe a violation of the law. You know, people may question it for sure. And you see, you know, like it's quite normal for a Clinton campaign to draw on people that she worked with previously in the Secretary of State's office. Not a problem for a Secretary of State to communicate to her successor in that office or there have staff communication. But, you know, it does further the Donald Trump narrative that the Obama White House was working to help Hillary Clinton avoid this issue.
And based on the reporting, one of the takeaways appears to be that they were worried, that both the administration and the Clinton campaign were worried about more questions regarding the emails.
That's right, and this was very early on in 2015, before the campaign was even formally launched. They were already starting to be concerned that this could be an issue.
And so one of the questions we need to ask now, why were they worried and what else is there? We started the week talking about Donald Trump's taxes, and there's more written about it as we end the week. And I'm curious whether or not this story continues, Glenn, or whether or not it goes away. And I'm talking specifically about the portion of tax returns that the New York Times was able to acquire. Basically, tax experts have said he did use the laws in the way that serve him, and there's nothing illegal that he did in this matter. So where do you think this story goes from here?
Well, I think the challenge here, and the reason it probably sticks with the campaign for a while longer, is that we don't actually have all of the tax documents to figure out exactly what he did. What we do know is that back in those periods of time, there was a general collapse of the commercial real estate industry, and there were laws that were changed to help them all out. And what you saw was Donald Trump applying those laws to his favor and finding a deduction, and quite possibly, you know, the laws allowed you to do two things if he did this, which we don't know for sure. It allowed you, on the one hand, to write down a large part of your business and carry that loss forward and a little bit backwards in time to mitigate profits you may make or had made. But also, if those loans that you took to run those businesses that went under were written down by the banks, you didn't have to count that as income, which was normally the way. And that was a special loophole for real estate investors.
In order for people to survive, which was a really bad housing situation in the 90s. Before I let you go, I want to ask you about the jobs report. This is all looking back when we look at the Clinton and Trump campaigns, but today we actually got some new jobs numbers. What did those numbers tell us? How do you think this relates to the campaign?
Well, the jobs numbers are very significant to the campaign because, on the one hand, does it further Clinton's narrative that the policies are working, you should continue, or does it further Donald Trump's change agenda? And what we saw was kind of in the middle of those two things. You know, there was growth in jobs, but not as much as expected. We saw an uptick in the unemployment rate, but that also reflected more people coming into the workforce, which is a good thing. We saw wages generally not moving. So I don't think it moved much in terms of the economic sentiment behind these campaigns, but both campaigns are going to try to figure it out.
It'll be interesting. Whichever glasses you're looking through, that will affect the number. And we have one more report before the election.
That's right, in November.
That'll be right before Election Day. Glenn, great to have you as always. Thank you very much. John?
Well, Hurricane Matthew closing in on Florida's Atlantic coast and the Jacksonville area, bringing heavy rain and damaging winds, leaving hundreds of thousands of people without power. Our next guest gives us an update on conditions.
A Fox Fox News Alert, we're watching Hurricane Matthew swamp the Florida coastline with the eye of the storm hanging just offshore. It's a powerful Category 3 hurricane whose outer bands of rain are already reaching South Carolina. 600,000 homes and businesses are without power in Florida alone, and authorities say they're getting calls for help from people who didn't evacuate. Joining us now, Ed Kelly, Mayor of Ormond Beach, Florida, just north of Daytona. Our viewers might remember, Mr. Mayor, we spoke to you yesterday. Initially, you were not going to evacuate, but then you did after the heating from some of your children. Where are you now? How do things look?
Right now, we are in Gainesville, Florida. Things are still calm here, just light breezes, a few showers, light rain, but we're safe, and we're actually glad that we listened to them. We also took our own advice, and that was to evacuate if you have a safe place to go. We urged people to do that, and we followed it. But everything, the preparation that our city staff has done, our city manager, the police department, the fire department, our public works department, all of the heroes, because they're all standing by, ready as soon as the storm passes to begin to clean up and to improve the safety, transportation, and travel for those that are there.
And Mr. Mayor, your city, your town is right on the beach. I mean, Ormond Beach, as the name suggests, is right there. I'm just wondering what you've heard about the storm surge in your area.
The storm surge was projected to be 10 feet. And the high tide is at 11, so that was supposed to have compounded the flooding area. And I think we're still in the big danger is going to be that, because we've had over 10 inches of rainfall on the beach side up through about 10:30. So there's still more rain to come, and we're expecting conditions to improve within the next 3 or 4 hours so that the crews can get out. Numerous trees down. We have 150,000 without power in Volusia County alone. So we have a significant amount without power. We've had one mobile home fire that no one happened to be in there. It was extinguished and taken care of, so that was good that no one was there. Like I said, the trees are down without power, and we're thankful that we're able to be here and with power.
Right, absolutely. We're thankful to have the conversation that we're having. What is your biggest concern as you look over the next several days and getting everybody back into their homes and power restored?
The power is going to be the big if. My guess is when you have that many just in our county alone, they're going to go and take care of everything that they can. And I understand we have crews that have come in from as far away as Texas to help. Thank for them. But that's going to be that. The big delay is going to be getting everything else cleaned up, the cleanup of individuals. I've had friends saying that he just heard a report that one of our peer restaurants in Daytona Beach Shores is gone. A friend of mine posted on Facebook that he had his boat dock for sale, no disassembly required. I think he lost a pretty nice-sized boat dock. So those are the things, repairing and replacing the things, but those are all just things. Thankful that people are safe. So far we've had no casualties, and that's the important part.
That is indeed.
All the stuff is just stuff.
Absolutely. That is the important part. And Mayor, thank you so much. It's great to have you back in the program. We look forward to checking back in with you, and we'll be right back with more Happening Now.